All right, so I haven't even been able to check out the quick play hack that was yesterday. So today will be the first time I actually do get to check it out. I know people have had some time on it, but figured I'd you know, eventually do a video on it, play some of it, give my thoughts on it, what I think, etc. Pickle passives? I just said pickle passives. Pickable passives is a new thing they're doing. I'll explain it for people who don't know what it is, and we'll go from there. So Sombra has taken over the quick play game modes again. We'll be giving you an extra boost of your choice with pickable passives. Just before I get into this, like, and we'll talk about all the balance that they're doing, and like, I'm sure some people here have already seen how it plays, what's good, what's bad. I think they're going to end up doing more of this, and I think this is like the step in this is like the first domino to like what they want to do overall. It very much feels to me like this is something they want to change, and eventually, and maybe it could be really good, every individual hero will have something like this, right? So as you can see, you have like, you know, pickable tank passives. Imagine having pickable tracer passives, right? As an example. And I think that would be really cool for the game. Obviously, there's a lot of things they would have to come up with. There might be certain metas, but like, if people end up liking this, I really think they'll end up doing that. And I have heard Paladins has had that. See, it's funny because whenever I hear about like adding like hero upgrades, I just think of MMOs because MMOs have had them for so long, right? So, well, yeah, I think Paladins has had it, like the idea of like just giving your heroes like different strengths or different abilities or like different, you know, passives. I'm just so used to like MMOs with that. You know what I mean? So like I'm like, oh yeah, this sounds great. But I'll explain a little bit more of what I mean. So the pickable tank passives that we see so far are Unyielding, debuff duration reduced by 40%. So debuff duration would be like on a grenade. So if on a grenade lasts for X amount of time, if I understand this correctly, it would just be 40% less time on that. I talked about I love the idea of having each hero have something like this. So an example would be, imagine if you're like, hey, I want to play Steadfast Diva. Now, Steadfast, I think is I don't know if I'm describing it correctly. I think Steadfast is like armored up or like extra strong. You know, maybe they have a individual hero passive for Diva called like Steadfast, where you get more armor, but you get like 20% less damage, right? So now you have the opportunity of like, okay, people go in your game, be like, oh, I'm a Steadfast Diva. I like to play a much more tanky Diva. Now your teammates can make decisions based off of that, or they'll just be mad that you're not picking the correct passive, because I'm sure there'll be meta passives. But do you see like how this could end up being a cool concept if it's done correctly, where you give like players those options? Or you could be like Assassin Diva, and you lose 200 armor, but you have a bit of increased damage, and you lose like 10% of your HP, but you're an Assassin Diva. And when you start to add that dynamic, it could be really good, or it could end up being terrible. But like, it's a cool concept that if done correctly, it could be really, really cool. So I like the idea of that concept. Obviously, there'll be meta stuff, but I think if they can find the correct way to do something like that, I think it could go really well. And I think it really would make Overwatch have a bit of a fresh feel. Now, keep in mind, just to once again reiterate here, I'm not saying whether this will be good or bad, right? It's more along the lines of, I like the idea of them trying something like that. Like trying something like that aggressive towards Overwatch, because clearly there's been like this issue over the past, I don't know, pretty much since Overwatch 2 started, where like everybody wants to, there's so many like various opinions about like what you want to see happen with Overwatch 2. So I think like for them, they're at the point where like they won't be able to really make a lot of adjustments without going even more advanced like this, right? Because eventually you do hit that wall, and you've seen a lot of that as like the discussions people have, is they talk about how like they've tried so many variables to try to like fix certain things, and eventually they either have to overbuff heroes, which we've seen with tanks, or they have to add like passives to the game that like make it playable for one of the roles. So that's why I like the idea of maybe having these pickable passives, but having even more like hero based, so that way you don't run into the issue of other stuff, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I don't know, I think it's a cool concept. Like I just imagine a lot of these heroes could have these really cool passives that I'm sure, I would not doubt it if they're already working on something like that. Like this is a very, 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 very like bare bones like version of what I think they'll end up doing. And I don't think it's something they'll have overnight. I don't think this is something that, I'm thinking more of like a Season 9 type of situation, right? You know what I mean? How Season 9 had all those aggressive changes and like really shook up the game. And truthfully, another reason why I think they would probably consider something like this is because like that was a major shakeup to Overwatch, right? It wasn't like they really changed even like a ton, but they made the game have a little bit more of a cool dynamic to it. And the game's player numbers were like at its all-time highest since Season 1. I say that, I don't have the data, but it very much appears that what we've seen is that's what happened, is that Overwatch had an influx again because they took the game and they made it something different. There's going to be some discussion on whether it will be good or bad for the game, and I think that's one of those things where at this point, maybe I'm wrong, but like at this point, just roll out the the aggressive passives on heroes one day and then just see what happens. Honestly, with the way that we've seen the feedback on the game now, a lot of time, I think a lot of it too, just people want to see change to the game. Like, it comes to the point where, like, sometimes, like, whether it's going to be good or bad for the game at the time, people just want to see, like, aggressive changes to Overwatch because they've had so many different versions of how they've done it. They've had times where they patch the game a ton. They've had times where they don't patch the game a ton. And the same thing ends up happening, and people want to see something different. And that's kind of where we're at right now with that, so. Actually, you know what? If you're watching this YouTube video right now, what are some passives? And now, maybe we can do a video on this. It'd be kind of cool. Dude, I don't know if this is me, just, I want people's thoughts on this. Would it be kind of fun to, like, go through each individual hero and come up with our own fun passives? Like, just as, like, a start, like, it has nothing to do with, like, just come up with random ideas that could, like, define each individual part of, like, I feel like that'd be kind of cool. They probably won't be good or bad, but, like, maybe they could be kind of fun to do. So, yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, also, leave it in the comments of, like, things that you think would be kind of cool. I'm kind of curious. You said, wasn't this what the PvE mode was going to be? Talents and passives and stuff? I think it was going to be... So, I do think that the PvE mode probably had talents. It's really hard to say because, like, we have very bare bones of what we could have had from the PvE, like, with, like, what we've seen. This isn't quite the talent tree yet. So, a talent tree is where, like, you level up, like, a character, and then, like, as you level up your character, you put, like, individual points in there. That's more of, like, what a talent tree would lead to. I don't think they would implement that. At the same time, I could be wrong. I mean, a lot of this could be stuff that they had in PvE, and they're like, okay, we have so many leftover assets. Why waste these assets when we can actually apply some of this, and that saves us 2 months of time that we would normally have to do to go and implement some of these assets, and then boom, right? You never know. Like, that could be, that very much could be a part of the stuff. We don't really know what they have. Like, unfortunate thing is that when it comes to the PvE side of things, we really don't know how deep they went with that, how much they had, because by the time that we did get it, right, or by the time that we got all that stuff, it was, like, it was very bare bones, right? Like, even like, we were discovering random things that existed in, like, their PvE modes in Overwatch 2 that they didn't even tell us because they weren't, like, they kind of just threw them out there and said, here, have fun. But yeah, tank passives look interesting. I'm going to try out some of these today. I feel like the armored one's probably really cool for some tanks. Like, I imagine giving Junker Queen, like, 100 armor could be really cool. Given some of those heroes that kind of struggle. At the flip side, I get concerned of, like, a hero like Roadhog, like, adding that extra, like, dynamic. Maybe that makes Hog feel better. Maybe it makes Hog feel worse. More than likely better, but you know what I mean? And the Last Stand one is very, very interesting. I'll try that, like, for sure. I think, you know what might actually benefit from Last Stand a lot? Diva, also. Okay, on to pickable damage passives. We have Slayer. See critical health enemies through walls. I mean, that's just... I don't know how this sounds to you, chat, but I think if I look at these pickable damage passives, I think Slayer would be the go-to, right? And don't get me wrong, the increased ammo capacity could be good, but it also depends on the hero, right? Maybe, like, having Trigger Happy on the increased ammo capacity, you put in, like, a Soldier 76, right? I think that would make sense.
Zara with
but, like, a hero like Cassidy, you'd get, like, what? Like, 1 extra bullet? That would be, like, what? 20% of 6 is, what, 1.2? So, yeah, you get, like, 1 extra bullet, right, on Cassidy. Reaper could see a good benefit from that, you know, 10 ammo. At the same time, I think, and I question this part of that. Do you think that the increased ammo capacity by 20%, like, do you really need 10 shots on Reaper? Like, do you find that, like, you need to reload more? You go to a hero like Reaper and I see Frenzy, which eliminations grant a brief 30% speed boost. And then it's like, wouldn't you want Frenzy as Reaper? But that's the cool part. Do you see, like, why I like the idea of, or the concept of passives? And I'm not saying they're perfect, but you see why I like the idea? Because you have to make that decision. Because then you're like, okay, I can get increased ammo, but then it's like, well, I'm popping off right now as Reaper. I don't think I need the increased ammo because I'm getting my limbs in 3 to 4 shots. You go back to spawn, and then you change to Frenzy, and then you go there. Do you see what I'm saying? So now you can be a little bit more aggressive, or you can say, I play more of a Frenzy-style Reaper, get aggressive with me. Now, on paper, that's what you expect to have. I mean, the players will have to play around that same way, but, like, I think that sounds cool. So, like, that's where, like, I think that these passives could really end up being something cool in Overwatch. I would like to see it on a much larger scale. Is basically what I'm getting at here. Is I think that if they go on a much larger scale, I think the real question is, and I think this is the discussion that you'll see within the community and, like, within the devs, is it worth spending a ton of time to make this a major part of the game? And as a streamer, I say yes, because I've seen the shakeups of... As a streamer, I say yes to that because I've seen what the shakeups of Overwatch do. Generally, when they do major shakeups, players come back and play the game. Is it going to be worth going down that? I think they're probably going to say yes to this. I keep in mind, I purposely haven't looked at too much of the feedback, but, like, from the general response I've seen in chat from people who have played it, a lot of people do like it. And now keep in mind, if you're one of those people that's like, oh, I don't like this so far, that's fine. I think that's also why I think there needs to be more customization to it, because if there's more customization, it might open up more of a fun dynamic for each individual hero. Also, maybe this is just the streamer slash YouTuber in me now, like the idea of making out like a cool like guide of like, you know, really cool passives for D.Va, like, or I play, you know, this is how you play Assassin D.Va, this is how you play Steadfast D.Va, this is how you play Mud D.Va, where like you can't move but you can do 10,000 increased damage. Like, there's a lot of really cool stuff. Okay, question we have here from XX Me Machine 42069XX says, given they struggle with balance, do you think passives could help or hinder specific hero balancing? When you say struggle with balance, you're referencing like trying to get like, you know, people not to counter swap type of things, right? As in like there's some things that have been impossible to like fix, and like, do I think passives could help? I mean, it's hard to say. It depends what each passive is, right? Because then you go down the route of, okay, you have 40 heroes who all need individual passives, so you're looking at, let's say you want to give 3 per, you have 120, right? And that's before other heroes are released. You have 120 passives you need to come up with. Some of those passives will not interact as well with each other, right? And I think that will be the problem they run into, because then it's a little bit less about balance sometimes too at that point. If Orisa becomes like this raid boss, but you can go like a passive on a different hero that makes Orisa raid boss feel worse, maybe you do that. But that part becomes hard to say, right? It's a little bit of a hindsight of like, I just don't know what to expect chat with that type of stuff, so I can't really give an answer on that. But I think what it might do is it might make we always have the discussion of Overwatch, right? And that discussion of Overwatch is that it's really hard to balance a game like Overwatch. And pretty much any hero balance-based game, whether it's League, whether it's Dota, etc. I'm just naming off, you know, you can go to FPS games too, etc. You're not going to be able to fully balance it, right? A lot of it's kind of like this give and take. So I think it could help with alleviating some of the feeling of if your hero that you really enjoy to play isn't on paper balanced or like as good, maybe those passives can bring that hero to the next level and then allow for you to enjoy the hero that you play more. An example of that, before we go to the support passives, is let's think about this with like Torb. Or like Torb. I think that's a good example. You want to play Torb on Attack Dorado, but you just can't. Torb just struggles on that map. But now you have a passive that gives you a 1 second. Torb can do this, right? This makes sense. This actually can go with the lore. Torb creates a jetpack for himself, where your trade-off is you lose your Molten Core, but now as Torb, you can use that ability to go and take a high ground. So you're trading off something, right? And it makes sense for a character like Torb, who obviously makes a bunch of like this stuff. Now you have this dynamic of where you can like add an extra level to Torb. And while Torb may be struggling in a meta that's dominated by snipers, maybe now that alleviates some of the pain points for a Torb player who is struggling on a map like Dorado. You said that seems like asking for unbalanced and overpowered passives and counter passives? I mean, that's already Overwatch to begin with, though, doesn't it? See, like, that's what Overwatch is, but at like a much simpler level. Like, that's already what it's at right now. That's why counter swapping feels so effective a lot of the time in Overwatch, is because, like, it's at a very base level of, like, there's a lot of unbalanced and overpowered things, and, like, they're going to be unbalanced and over. But that's Overwatch in general. There's going to be balance that's going to be super strong. There's going to be balance that isn't good. So maybe passives alleviate that. I keep saying maybe to this because I don't really know. I can only go off of just like theory. And sometimes like you can theorize something, but the way that players will play it could be way different. Okay, I'll give you an example. You know how in like MMOs, they probably have like a team there that goes, okay, we're going to plan out 3 months of content, right? And everything on paper's planned. They're happy with it. They know exactly what they want to do. They're like, okay, this is great. But then the players figure out a way to exploit that. They level up in a week and a half, and now that it's been, you get what I'm saying? And my point I'm making is that like sometimes like they could plan all this stuff out, and then it still won't go as well because the way that it's being played is not what they expected. That's why on paper I don't know how it would go, but I like the idea of them trying that. Anyway, continue on. Onto the pickable support passes. We have Resourceful is reduce cooldowns by 20%. I feel like that's a break point for some heroes. I don't know which heroes, but I imagine some here. Oh, wait a second. I feel like every support might benefit from that. I was just gonna say, because my first thought was like, imagine a Brig with like 20% reduced cooldowns. Like you could keep your other support alive way more, and then you could have your other support play like Swift Save, for example, and that says increase healing by 50% for targets below 35% HP. You've now created an unkillable Ana Brig backline. Does that make sense? Because now you have a Brig who can like armor pack an Ana way more, and then you have an Ana who can like heal up a Brig if they get low. So like now you have like a unkillable on a bring back line. Point being, by the way, is this is also another dynamic where you get to start to pair that with like, you know, if you're a DPS or you're a support or even a tank, like when you're with your supports, you can like come up with really cool combos here. So like let's say that you have that steadfast tank, right? You may not need to go swift save because you don't expect your steadfast diva to get low a lot of the time. So you're like, okay, I'm not going to need to burst heal them. So you know what I should do? Maybe I should go close call here because I'm getting dove by their backline. So now I can make a more effective play and gain a 20% speed boost when I'm below 50% HP. So I can reposition myself, or you can go resourceful and you can be able to. So like there's a really cool dynamic that's happening here that I'm very interested in seeing where it goes. We'll see though. But I'm curious to see what passives, and this leads my question, especially on the YouTube side of things, is what passive would you think would be a good addition to the hero that you play? So if you're a Torb player, what's a passive that would help you? And not necessarily be OP, but will be helpful in situations where you struggle a bit. And I think that'll be a good question to bring up. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button. Subscribe to all 3 YouTubes if you haven't. Leave a comment. All of it helps. Definitely let me know what you think about this style of video, too. I feel like sometimes I could do way more of this, and like I talk about I could do way more of this, but I want to do way more of it because I just like love talking about stuff in general. So let me know what you think. Outside of that, we record these live on stream, so stop by if you haven't. We have a lot of fun here. And with that being said, I hope you have an amazing day/night.